17 million cubic meters of concrete, 1.2 million tons of steel, 3,000 miles of fortifications from the North Cape of Norway to the border of Spain. The largest defensive wall ever built by human hands. It was called the Atlantic Wall, and Adolf Hitler swore it could not be broken. On the morning of June the 6th, 1944, it was broken. Not in a month, not in a week, in a single morning. How? The answer is not what you have been told. It is not about brave men on a beach, though there were brave men. It is not about a wall of concrete, though the concrete was real. The answer is a secret so strange, so completely outside the way soldiers had ever thought about war, that the German High Command never understood what had happened to them. Not on June the 6th, not in July, not even after the war was over. This is the story of what really crossed the English Channel that morning, and why the greatest wall in history fell to something the men defending it could not even see. Early spring 1944. The wind off the English Channel carries salt and something sharper, something metallic. It smells of what is coming. A man stands alone on the seawall at a village called Rivabella, just north of Cannes. He is 52 years old. His greatcoat snaps against his legs. His field glasses hang from his neck, but he is not using them. He is simply looking, letting the gray water do the talking. He has done this at 100 beaches now. Denmark, Holland, Belgium, the mouth of the Somme, the cliffs of Normandy, the rocky headlands of Brittany, 3,000 miles of coastline, and he has walked or driven every mile of it that matters. His name is Erwin Rommel. In Berlin, in Paris, in London, in Washington, they call him the Desert Fox. In the newsreels that still play in German cinemas, he is the general who bent the sands of North Africa to his will, the commander whose panzers moved faster than the enemy could think. But the man on the seawall this morning is not that man. The Africa campaign is over. The desert is lost. Rommel has been given a new command, and it is not a command of movement. It is a command of concrete. He turns his face into the wind. Somewhere across that gray water, in ports along the southern coast of England, an army is gathering. He does not know how large. He does not know exactly where it will come. He does not know when. But he knows what it will bring because he has seen it before in the skies over Tunisia when his columns burned on open roads and there was nothing at all that his men could do about it. He speaks to no one because there is no one to speak to. His aide waits in the car 20 meters back. What Rommel says next, he says to himself, and it will become the most important sentence in the German war in the West. The first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive. For the Allies as well as for Germany, it will be the longest day. He does not mean it as a phrase, he means it as a physics equation. Everything, every gun emplacement, every meter of barbed wire, every underwater obstacle he is having driven into the sand at low tide, every mine, every bunker, every pillbox is designed around this one belief, that the invasion is a battle, that a battle has an edge, that the edge is the waterline, that the war in the West can be fought and won in the space of a single day on a strip of wet sand a few meters wide. This is not just Rommel's belief. This is the entire theory of victory for Nazi Germany and France. Behind him, hundreds of miles of the Atlantic Wall are being poured, 17 million cubic meters of concrete, 1.2 million tons of steel, dragged into place by hundreds of thousands of forced laborers from every corner of occupied Europe. It is the largest fortification project in human history, and it is all built around one fragile idea, that the enemy will come, that the enemy will die on the sand, and that it will be over by nightfall. Rommel turns from the sea. He walks back to the car. The engine is already running. He does not know it yet, but he has just described a war he is not going to fight. To understand how the largest wall in the history of warfare collapsed in less than a day, we have to leave this windswept beach and travel inland. Because the war in the West is not going to be lost on the coast. It is going to be lost long before the first landing craft drops its ramp. It is going to be lost in 2 rooms, 2 headquarters, 2 men, and a quarrel between them that will paralyze the entire German army in France. The first room is a chateau, Saint-Germain-en-Laye. west of Paris, 18th century stone, tall windows, polished wooden floors that creak under the boots of staff officers. On the walls, maps. Not tactical maps of individual beaches, but grand maps, continental maps, the kind of maps a chess master leans over when he is thinking 3 moves ahead. The commander of this headquarters is Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt. He is 68 years old. He is a Prussian aristocrat of the old school, born in a century that no longer exists, trained in an army that no longer exists, fighting a war he still believes belongs to that older world. His uniform is immaculate. His voice is quiet. He drinks red wine at lunch. He does not raise his voice at his staff because he does not have to. Von Rundstedt is the Oberbefehlshaber West, Commander-in-Chief, Western Theater. On paper, every German soldier from the North Cape of Norway to the Spanish border answers to him. In practice, as we will see, this is a fiction. Von Rundstedt looks at the map of France and he does not see beaches. He sees space, he sees the great rivers, the Seine, the Loire. He sees the road networks radiating out from Paris. He sees ground that can be traded for time, ground that can swallow an invading army, ground that can be used to lure the enemy forward until he is overextended, until his supply lines are stretched to the breaking point, and until the moment is right for the single, decisive, annihilating counterstroke. This is not improvisation. This is doctrine. It has a name, Kesselschlacht, the Cauldron Battle. It is how Germany destroyed the French army in 1940. It is how Germany destroyed Soviet armies at Kiev and Vyazma. You let the enemy in. You surround him. You cut him off. You destroy him at leisure, far from the sea, far from the naval guns, in a place of your own choosing. For von Rundstedt, the invasion is not a problem to be solved at the waterline. The waterline is a distraction. The waterline is where junior officers fight. Field marshals fight inland on the map, in the space between the coast and the capital. Let the Allies land, let them come ashore. Let them push forward 100 kilometers into France, and then and only then unleash the Panzers. Not a division here, a division there, scattered along 3,000 miles of coast. No, all of them, concentrated. A single mailed fist, driving into the flank of an overextended enemy, cutting him off from the sea, and grinding him to nothing in the fields of Normandy or Picardy, or wherever he happens to be when the trap closes. This is the war von Rundstedt is preparing to fight. It is elegant, it is proven. It is in his mind unassailable. It is also, though he does not yet know it, a fantasy. The second room is not a room, it is a car. Rommel's staff car, bouncing down a rutted road somewhere between Le Havre and Cherbourg. Rommel is in the back seat, a map on his knee, a pencil in his hand, marking gap. Everything is a gap. This sector needs more mines. This bunker is not yet poured. This anti-tank ditch is only half dug. The soldiers here are not fit for combat. They are convalescents, or Poles conscripted at bayonet point, or Georgians who will surrender the moment the naval bombardment begins. He does not sleep in chateau. He sleeps where the day ends, in a field kitchen, in the back of a truck, in the guest room of a village priest. He is 52 years old, and he moves like a man of 30. And he has come back from Africa with a lesson burned so deeply into him that he cannot stop repeating it, cannot stop shouting it, cannot get anyone at the higher headquarters to truly understand it. Air power. Von Rundstedt has never served under the wings of the Allied air forces. Rommel has. In Tunisia, he watched his columns die on open roads, not in battle, not in glorious combat, just erased from the sky by fighter bombers that his own Luftwaffe could no longer chase off. He watched entire regiments of tanks and trucks turn into black smoke in minutes, helpless, unable even to disperse before the next wave came in. Von Rundstedt is planning a grand battle of maneuver inland. Rommel closes his eyes in the back of the staff car, and he can already see it. He can see the Panzer Lehr Division, the finest armored division in the German army, massing on the roads north of Chartres for the great counterattack. He can see the Allied reconnaissance aircraft circling overhead. He can see the fighter bombers coming in. He can see the burning wrecks. He can see the counterattack ending before it ever reaches the coast. The enemy is stronger than us in all things, he writes again and again in his reports, except perhaps in the immediate vicinity of the coast. The invasion, Rommel argues, must be defeated where the enemy is weakest. And the enemy is weakest for exactly 1 hour, the hour in which he is climbing out of his landing craft, in which he is wading through chest-deep water, in which he is exposed on open sand, in which his tanks have not yet reached the shore, in which his artillery is still afloat. That hour is the war. Every Panzer division must be within minutes of the beach. Not hours, not days, minutes. Hidden in orchards, hidden in villages, ready to storm forward the moment the first landing craft touches the sand, and to drive the invaders back into the sea before they can form a line. There is no plan B, there is no fallback. If they get off the beach, Rommel says they will not be stopped. And now the first turn in our story, the one no one talks about, because the man building the Atlantic Wall does not, in his private heart, believe in it. Rommel has inspected every mile. He knows the truth. He knows that whole sections of the wall exist only in the propaganda newsreels that Joseph Goebbels sends to German cinemas. He knows that many of the bunkers are unmanned or half-built. He knows that the divisions holding the coast are not the elite of the Wehrmacht. They are old men, wounded men, boys, and unwilling conscripts from lands the German army has conquered. He writes to his wife Lucy in late 1943, "The wall exists more in the imagination of the Führer than on the coast of France." And yet he pours the concrete. He drives the stakes into the sand. He plants the mines. Because for a man who has seen what Allied air power can do, the wall is not an ideal solution. It is the only solution. It is the one place, the one moment where the geometry of the beach might briefly cancel out the geometry of the sky. He is not defending the wall because he believes in it. He is defending it because there is nothing else left to believe in. 2 field marshals, 2 rooms, 2 entirely incompatible wars. Von Rundstedt wants the panzers held back near Paris, concentrated, ready for the great inland battle. Rommel wants them scattered along the coast, hidden in the villages behind the dunes, ready to counterattack in minutes. Von Rundstedt calls Rommel's plan reckless. To commit the Panzer divisions piecemeal, in daylight, within range of the Allied naval guns, is to throw away Germany's most powerful weapon before the real battle begins. Rommel calls von Rundstedt's plan a fantasy, a ghost of a war that no longer exists, a grand maneuver in a sky the Luftwaffe no longer controls. A tank division cannot be in 2 places at once, and so the 2 men do the only thing left to do. They appeal to the one authority above them both, the Führer. Adolf Hitler is 55 years old. He has not commanded a company in the field since 1918, but he is now, in the spring of 1944, the sole and final arbiter of every major decision in the German war effort. He has fired his own chief of the General Staff. He has taken personal command of the army. He does not trust his generals, and his generals no longer trust him. The debate is presented to him. Von Rundstedt's paper, Rommel's paper, the maps, the arguments. Hold the panzers back for the great encirclement, or push them forward for the death on the beach. Hitler listens, and then he makes the decision that more than any bunker, more than any mine, more than any single tactical failure on the day of the invasion, will lose the war in the West. He chooses neither. Or rather, he chooses a compromise so tangled, so paralyzing, so perfectly designed to satisfy no one that it will render Germany's most powerful weapon useless at the exact moment it is most needed. The Panzer divisions in France are cut into pieces. 3 divisions are given to Rommel for his coastal defense. The 21st Panzer near Caen, the 2nd Panzer near Amiens, additional Panzer Grenadier units strung along the coast. These are the divisions Rommel can order into action himself. It is a fraction of what he asked for. The rest, the crown jewels, the divisions that would decide any real battle, are held back. The 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte, the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend, the fanatical teenagers of the Hitler Youth, turned into an armored formation. The Panzer Lehr Division, arguably the single most powerful armored formation in the entire German military, built from demonstration units and staffed with instructors. These divisions are placed into a new category, the OKW Reserve, the reserve of the High Command of the Armed Forces. And here is the trap. Von Rundstedt cannot order them into battle. Rommel cannot order them into battle. Neither the theater commander nor the army group commander has any authority over them at all. They can only be committed to combat on the direct, personal, explicit order of Adolf Hitler himself. Hitler, who is not in France. Hitler, who is at his headquarters in East Prussia, more than 1,000 kilometers from the coast. Hitler, who keeps a nocturnal schedule, who works through the night and sleeps through the morning, and whose staff has learned, at their peril, not to wake him without a very good reason. Imagine the chain of command that will be required on the day of the invasion. Rommel at the front must identify the main landing. He must judge, in the fog and smoke and chaos of the first hours, that this is the real thing and not a diversion. He must then report this up to his superior, von Rundstedt, at the chateau in Saint-Germain. Von Rundstedt, who has no authority over the reserves he needs, must then formally petition Hitler's military staff at OKW headquarters more than 1,000 kilometers away in East Prussia. There, staff officers must decide whether the report is important enough to disturb the Führer. If they decide yes, they must wake him. He must be briefed on second-hand or third-hand information by men who are not looking at the beach, not smelling the smoke, not hearing the guns. And he must then issue, or not issue, the order to release Panzer divisions that are sitting a few hours' drive from the battle. By the late spring of 1944, Germany does not have a plan for the defense of France. It has 3 plans, and they cancel each other out. It has Rommel's desperate, under-resourced plan to win on the sand, with a handful of divisions and a wall he does not fully believe in. It has von Rundstedt's theoretical, elegant, and now completely impossible plan for the great inland battle. And it has Hitler's plan, which is not really a plan at all. It is a habit of control. It is the reflex of a man who trusts no one, who insists on holding every important decision in his own hands, and who will, on the day it matters most, be asleep. Everything now rests on Rommel. Everything rests on the theory that the longest day will be, in fact, one day, that the wall will hold long enough, that the beach will do its work, that the enemy will die on the sand. The German High Command has wagered the war in the West on a single sentence spoken by a man in a greatcoat on a windswept seawall. The first 24 hours will be decisive. They will be, but not in the way he means, not in the way any of them mean. Because what is gathering on the other side of the channel, in the ports of southern England, is not the invasion Rommel has planned for. It is not the invasion von Rundstedt has planned for. It is not the invasion Hitler has imagined from his map room in East Prussia. It is not, in the sense any German commander understands the word an army at all. It is something else, something new in the history of warfare, something that has never crossed a beach before because it has never existed before. And in a few short weeks, it will begin to cross. The night of June the 5th, 1944, a small stone farmhouse near the village of La Roche-Guyon on the Seine. This is the forward headquarters of Army Group B, Rommel's headquarters. And Rommel is not here. Rain streaks the windows. The wind has been rising for 2 days. Out in the channel, whitecaps roll under a low gray sky, and the meteorologist attached to the German 7th Army has been unambiguous. The seas are too rough. The clouds are too low. No sane Allied commander would launch an invasion in this weather. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not this week. Rommel has read the forecast. He has read it, and he has trusted it. His wife, Lucy, will turn 50 tomorrow on the 6th of June. He has not been home in months. He has bought her a pair of gray suede shoes, size 5.5, in Paris. They are wrapped in his luggage. The staff car is waiting. He leaves for Germany before dawn. At the exact moment High crosses the border into the Reich, a young British glider pilot named Jim Walwork is releasing his tow rope over the coast of Normandy. His Horsa glider is loaded with 30 men of the Ox and Bucks Light Infantry. He is aiming for a pair of bridges over the Caen Canal and the Orne River. His touchdown will be within 50 yards of his target, It will be, by some accounts, the most precise piece of flying in the entire war. It is 16 minutes past midnight on the 6th of June, 1944. The German coastal defense system does not, at first, understand what is happening. The first reports come in scattered. Parachutes near Sainte-Mère-Église, parachutes near Ronville, small arms fire, confusion. The 7th Army headquarters at Le Mans logs the reports and hesitates. For months, there have been alarms, false sightings, dummy paratroopers dropped by the Allies to test the response. Nothing has ever come of any of it. The staff officer on duty is cautious. He does not want to be the man who cries wolf. He waits. At around 3 in the morning, the reports begin to pile up faster than they can be filed. Not one drop zone, many, not one sector, all of them along a front of dozens of kilometers. And then just before dawn, a sound reaches the German bunkers on the coast that is unlike any sound in the history of warfare. It is not a roll of thunder. It is not a bombardment. It is the sound of an ocean full of ships opening fire at the same instant. 6,000 vessels, thousands of guns, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, the old naval guns of the USS Texas, of HMS Warspite, of HMS Ramillies, throwing shells the size of small automobiles into the concrete of the Atlantic Wall. And still, in the paneled rooms of the German High Command, the question is not yet answered. The question that has consumed them for 2 years. The question that has decided the position of every division, every gun, every mine. Where? Because up the coast, north of the Seine, in the region called the Pas-de-Calais, sits the German 15th Army, 200,000 men, the strongest formation in the West. They are staring at the shortest crossing of the Channel, 21 miles, the obvious place, the logical place, the place every doctrine of amphibious warfare would identify as the true objective. They wait, they watch, and they see nothing. Here is the second turn in our story, and it is one of the strangest, most patient deceptions ever mounted in war. For months, the Allies have been building an army that does not exist. It has a name, the 1st United States Army Group. It has a commander, the ferocious General George Patton, whom the Germans regard as the most dangerous Allied commander in the theater. It has divisions with real designations. It has radio traffic humming across southeast England 24 hours a day. It has inflatable rubber tanks parked in fields where German reconnaissance can photograph them. It has plywood landing craft moored at Dover. It has entire warehouses of correspondence, of order books, of signal logs being generated by a handful of British specialists in a small suite of offices in London. None of it is real. All of it is real to the Germans. They call the operation Fortitude South. And the whole point of it, the entire 2-year investment of imagination and lumber and radio operators and false paperwork, is aimed at this exact moment, at this exact hour, at the German 15th Army sitting in the Pas-de-Calais, listening to the guns firing at Normandy and being absolutely certain that Normandy is the diversion, that the real blow is still coming, any day now, any hour now, from General Patton and his ghost army straight across the shortest crossing aimed at the industrial heart of Germany. And so on the morning of the 6th of June, as the largest amphibious operation in human history unfolds on the beaches of Normandy, the strongest German army in France does not move. It does more than not move. The silence at the Pas-de-Calais is interpreted by the German command as proof that the enemy is holding back his main force, proof that Normandy is the feint, proof that the great blow is still coming. Every report of a landing in Normandy is filtered through this single poisonous assumption. The evidence of the eyes is discounted. The evidence of what is not happening at Calais is trusted more than the evidence of what is happening at Omaha. The deception is so complete that it will not be fully broken for weeks. Weeks in which the German 15th Army, the strongest formation in France, will stand and watch and wait for an invasion that will never come. But there is still, on this morning, one weapon that could change everything. A few miles inland from the eastern beaches, in the fields and orchards south of Caen, the men of the 21st Panzer Division are already awake. Their tanks are fueled, their engines are warm. This is the one armored division Rommel has wrestled under his own direct control. Their commander is General Major Edgar Feuchtinger, 49 years old, a career artilleryman turned tank officer, more of a Nazi Party favorite than a battlefield veteran. But on this morning, that will not matter. What matters is that his tanks are ready and the beach is a few kilometers away, and this is exactly the scenario Rommel has spent months screaming into every telephone he can find. An armored counterattack at the beach in the first hours, before the enemy can consolidate, before the enemy can bring his own tanks ashore. Feuchtinger requests permission to attack. The reply is silence. Rommel is unreachable. He is in his car somewhere in Germany on his way to buy his wife a birthday cake. His chief of staff, General Lieutenant Hans Speidel, is at La Roche-Guyon, and Speidel, like everyone else in that fog-shrouded headquarters, is trying to determine whether the reports from the coast are the real invasion or an elaborate diversion. The chain of command Rommel has fought so hard to build is working exactly as its critics feared. Without Rommel himself at the front, it does not move. It hesitates. It calls upward for guidance. It waits. And then mid-morning, Feuchtinger receives his order. He is to attack, but not against the American landings to the west and not against the British landings on Sword Beach directly to the north. He is to swing to the east to deal with the British paratroopers who have seized the bridges over the Orne. His tanks turn, they move, and by the time the confusion is untangled and new orders arrive to redirect the attack back to the coast, precious hours have vanished. But here is what the record shows, and here is the third great turning point of this day, one that historians have written about, and that popular memory is almost forgotten. By late afternoon on the 6th of June, the 21st Panzer Division does attack toward the beaches, and it does not just attack. It gets there. A battle group under Colonel Hans von Oppeln-Bronikowski drives north from Cannes with something like 90 tanks, straight into the gap between Sword Beach and Juno Beach. The British infantry, still consolidating their beachhead, are thin on the ground here. The gap is real, and through that gap, one small element of Feuchtinger's division reaches the coast in the late afternoon. They can see the sea. They can see the ships offshore. For a brief, glittering moment on the day the wall broke, a German armored unit has done exactly what Rommel promised his tanks would do. They are on the beach, and then above their heads, the sky darkens. Not with weather, with gliders. Wave after wave of Allied gliders, hundreds of them, coming in low over the German positions to reinforce the British airborne troops who have been fighting since before dawn. To Feuchtinger and to Oppeln-Bronikowski, watching from their tank turrets, the message is unmistakable. Their small armored spearhead is now sitting between the sea and a fresh airborne division that is landing behind them. In the language of a Panzer commander, they are about to be cut off, surrounded. They pull back. That is the moment. Not a great battle, not a heroic last stand. A calculation, a prudent decision by a commander who has read the situation and cannot see the larger picture, who does not know that the British forces to his north are exhausted and disorganized, that a determined push might have reached the water in force and cut the beachhead in half, that this is the one and only chance Germany will have on this day to reach the sea. He sees only the gliders. He sees only the risk of encirclement, and he does what any careful soldier would do. He withdraws. The finest chance to reverse the invasion of Europe ends not with a bang, but with a radioed order to fall back. There will be no other chance. Meanwhile, on a stretch of sand 100 kilometers to the west, the theory of Erwin Rommel is being validated in the most horrifying way imaginable. The Americans have codenamed this beach Omaha. To the men holding the bluffs above it, it is simply another sector of the wall. Wider stands nest 62, wider stands nest 72. Machine gun nests numbered like houses on a suburban street. The defenders are not old men. They are not conscripts. They are the veteran 352nd Infantry Division, moved into position only weeks before, a fact that Allied intelligence has failed to detect. Their bunkers are dug into cliffs 100 feet above the sand. Their machine guns cover every meter of the beach in interlocking arcs. Their mortars are pre-registered on the exact grid squares where the American landing craft will drop their ramps. Their artillery is hidden on the reverse slopes, invisible to the naval guns offshore. This is Rommel's death zone made real, not a theory, not a diagram. 200 meters of open sand between the waterline and the seawall, every inch of it swept by fire. The first wave of the American 1st Infantry Division and the 29th Infantry Division reaches this beach at 6:30 in the morning. The ramps of the landing craft drop. And what happens next is not a battle, it is a slaughter. Men are cut down before they can leave the boats. Men are cut down in the surf. Men who reach the sand find no cover because there is no cover. The engineers who were supposed to blow the beach obstacles are killed with their explosives strapped to their backs. The tanks that were supposed to swim ashore have sunk in the rough seas. The naval bombardment has missed the bunkers. The bombers overhead, afraid of hitting their own men, have dropped their loads a mile inland. Every plan has failed. Every advantage has evaporated. For the first 3 hours on Omaha Beach, the wall is winning. Reports flowing up to the German Corps headquarters are almost euphoric. The enemy is being thrown back into the sea. The counterattack is in full motion. From the German bunkers on the bluffs, this is not a bloody stalemate. This is a triumph. Rommel's entire theory that a well-prepared static defense could break an amphibious assault even without immediate Panzer support is being written in blood on the sand below. And then the fourth turning point of our story, the one that saved Omaha Beach. It did not come from a plan. It did not come from a grand maneuver. It did not come from the specialized British armor that was clearing the Commonwealth beaches to the east because the Americans had declined to use those tanks. It did not come from air power, which had failed. It came from 9 ships. By mid-morning, the American Task Force commander offshore, Rear Admiral Carleton Bryant, watching the massacre through his binoculars from the deck of the battleship USS Texas, gives an order that violates every principle of naval doctrine. He orders his destroyers to close with the beach, not to their designated firing positions offshore, not within the safe operating range for 800-ton warships. He orders the 9 American destroyers, USS Frankfurt, USS McCook, USS Carmack, USS Doyle, USS Emmons, USS Baldwin, USS Harding, USS Satterley, USS Thompson. Each of them displaces less than 2,000 tons. Each of them draws only a few feet of water. Each of them mounts 4 or 5 5-inch guns. They steam in until their keels are almost scraping the sandbars. 800 yards from the beach, 600 yards, 400 yards, close enough to see the individual soldiers on the sand. Close enough for their gunners to aim not with fire control computers, but with their eyes, their 5-inch guns depressed to nearly point-blank range. And they begin to fire, 1 bunker at a time, 1 gun position at a time, 1 machine gun nest at a time. The USS Frankfurt, commanded by Lieutenant Commander James Semmes, comes in so close that a stranded American tank on the beach begins signaling targets to her with its own turret gun. Wherever the tank fires, the Frankfurt fires. The tank marks a bunker, the Frankfurt destroys it. For nearly 2 hours, these 9 small warships stand and fight in water so shallow they cannot maneuver. They cannot dodge, they cannot retreat. They simply stand and shoot and destroy the wall 1 embrasure at a time. And slowly on the sand behind them, small groups of American infantry begin to move. A lieutenant here, a sergeant there, a gap found in the wire, a path up a gully, a blown bunker exploited before the Germans can man the next position. By the middle of the morning, the wall on Omaha is beginning to fail, not because it was outfought by an army, because it was outfought by 9 destroyers and a few hundred men who refused to die on the sand. By nightfall on the 6th of June, more than 150,000 Allied soldiers are ashore in Normandy. The wall has been breached at 5 separate places along a 60-mile front. Rommel, driving frantically back from Germany, will not reach his headquarters until the following evening. By the time he arrives, the beach battle is already lost. The invasion is not being pushed back into the sea. The invasion is here on French soil, and it is not leaving. For the German High Command, this is a serious setback. It is not, in their minds, yet a catastrophe. The thinking at Saint-Germain-en-Laye begins to shift. Very well. The battle for the beaches is lost. The battle for France is now beginning. The new plan is simple, and it is drawn from every page of the classical German playbook. Containment. Throw a cordon of panzers around the beachhead. Stop the enemy from breaking out into the open country of France. Hold him, bleed him, grind him against the sea until he cannot sustain the effort. They are still at this moment thinking that they are fighting an army. Over the next 7 weeks, the reports from the front will begin to describe something the German command has no framework for. And it is in these reports, filed by exhausted staff officers in requisitioned French farmhouses, that the true nature of what has crossed the Channel begins to reveal itself. The first sign comes from the Panzer commanders around Caen. The Germans hold the ridges and orchards south of that city, and they are killing Allied tanks with a professionalism honed on the Eastern Front. Their Panther tanks, with their long, high-velocity 75mm guns, are more than a match for anything the Allies have brought ashore. Their Tigers, when they appear, are practically invulnerable to the standard 75mm gun on the American Sherman. Allied crews themselves have a grim nickname for the Sherman. They call it the Ronson, after the American cigarette lighter, because of its tendency to ignite on the first hit. The Germans, killing them from the hedgerows, have their own name for it. Tommy Kotcher, the Tommy Cooker. A German panzer company will set an ambush in a Norman orchard. 4 Panthers hidden in dappled shade waiting. A column of Shermans rumbles down a narrow lane between hedgerows. The lead Panther fires. The lead Sherman explodes. The rear Panther fires. The rear Sherman explodes. The middle of the column is trapped. In 7 minutes, 10 Shermans burn. The Panthers pull back, unmarked. Tactical perfection. A textbook engagement of the kind German cadets have been studying for a generation. The next morning, in the same sector, 10 new Shermans appear, their tread still chalked with the loading marks of the depot, their crews unfamiliar with the ground. Fresh coffee still warm in their canteens. The Germans set another ambush. They destroy 9 of them. The morning after that, 10 more Shermans arrive. Fritz Bayerlein, the commander of the Panzer Division, is one of the finest armored tacticians in the German army. He served under Rommel in the desert. He has been fighting professional armored warfare for 4 years. He begins to write reports that his own superiors do not know how to file. In these reports, he describes an enemy who cannot be defeated by tactical excellence. He describes an enemy who, in his own words, seems to have unlimited material resources. He describes the growing sense among his officers that they are fighting not soldiers, but a hydra. For every head they cut off, 2 grow back overnight. To a German commander, a destroyed enemy tank is a permanent subtraction. That weapon is gone. Its crew is gone. Somewhere in Germany, a factory under constant bombing must produce a replacement, ship it across a continent under Allied air attack, train a new crew, and deliver it to the front. Weeks, months, sometimes never. For the Allied logistical system, that same destroyed Sherman is not a loss. It is a line item on a form. A defective unit removed from an active assembly line. A replacement request already being processed by a supply clerk in a tent on Omaha Beach, transmitted in code and fulfilled by a ship already halfway across the Atlantic before the wreck has stopped burning. The Germans do not yet grasp at this. They only know that killing tanks is not depleting the enemy. The second sign comes from the roads. On the 12th of June, German artillery observers with the 352nd Infantry Division identify a perfect target, a narrow sunken lane leading inland from the Vierville draw at Omaha Beach. This is a critical artery, funneling thousands of American soldiers and vehicles off the beach and into the fighting inland. A concentrated barrage lasting 20 minutes cratered the road, collapses its banks, and litters it with the wrecks of a dozen trucks. Tactical success, a vital enemy supply route severed. The resulting traffic jam should paralyze the American advance in this sector for days. 3 hours later, the road is open again, not repaired, rebuilt. A unit of the United States Navy construction battalions, the Seabees, has arrived with armored bulldozers, road graders, and truckloads of interlocking perforated steel matting. They do not see a disaster. They see a work order. The bulldozers push the burning trucks into the ditches. Earth is scraped into the craters. Steel matting is laid over the churned ground. By late afternoon, the road is not just passable. It is wider than before, stronger than before, better than before. A German forward observer, watching through binoculars, would have to report the impossible, that the enemy has used a German artillery strike as an opportunity to upgrade his own infrastructure. That damage inflicted has been converted in a matter of hours into improvement. The third sign comes from the sky. Luftwaffe reconnaissance in Normandy is now suicidal. The Allies control the air so completely that a German aircraft over the beaches lives, on average, for minutes. But the pilots who make it back begin to bring photographs that no one in the intelligence sections can interpret. Enormous hollow blocks of concrete, some of them as large as 6-story buildings, being towed slowly across the English Channel. The analysts at WWII gather around the photographs and argue. What are they? Anti-submarine defenses? Floating barges? Perhaps they are meant to be sunk as block ships to create makeshift breakwaters. The scale seems absurd, the purpose obscure. Then the pilots return with photographs even harder to explain. The concrete blocks are being sunk in a precise line, 2 kilometers off the coast at Arromanches on Gold Beach. Behind them, other structures are being assembled from parts brought across the channel. Floating steel pier heads on legs that rise and fall with the tide. Miles of floating steel roadway snaking across the water toward the shore. The German staff cannot make sense of what they are seeing because the frame they are looking through does not permit it. Their entire strategic calculation, everything they have based their defensive plan upon for 2 years, rests on a single premise: that to sustain a modern army in the field, the Allies must capture a major deep-water port: Cherbourg, Le Havre, Antwerp. This is not opinion, this is doctrine. It is drawn from every logistical study, every war college analysis, every previous amphibious operation. An army eats, an army drinks fuel, an army consumes ammunition at rates measured in thousands of tons per day. Such quantities can only come through a proper port. And so the entire German defensive strategy in Normandy at this moment is focused on holding those ports, on denying Cherbourg to the Americans, on preparing to demolish its harbor facilities so completely that even if captured, the port will be useless for months. What none of them can grasp, because it has never been done, because it is not in any doctrine, is what the photographs actually show. The Allies have not planned to capture a port. The Allies have brought a port with them. Its code name is Mulberry. There are 2 of them. Mulberry A, off Omaha Beach, will be destroyed by a great channel storm on the 19th of June. But Mulberry B, off Arromanches on Gold Beach, will survive. It will be renamed unofficially Port Winston, in honor of the man in London who insisted on the whole audacious idea. It is a fully functioning artificial harbor, rising from the open sea on a hostile shore, and within weeks it will be unloading up to 7,000 tons of supplies a day, with the capacity on paper to handle nearly twice that. The German defense of Cherbourg, the whole strategic obsession of holding those port cities, becomes irrelevant before the battle for the city has even been properly joined. But there is one more mystery, and it is the one that finally begins to break the intellectual composure of the German high command. The intelligence analysts have done the math. They know how many vehicles the Allies have ashore. They know how many gallons of gasoline those vehicles must consume per day to move and to fight. They know how many oil tankers would be required to deliver that quantity of fuel. And they can see from their reconnaissance photographs that no such tanker fleet exists off the Normandy coast. The Allied war machine is drinking rivers of fuel, and no one can find where the fuel is coming from. Part of the answer is coming at this moment on tankers offloading at temporary sea terminals just off the invasion beaches, pumping their cargo through submerged flexible hoses into buried tank farms in the fields behind the dunes. And part of the answer is on the bottom of the English Channel, or will be very soon. The Allies have called it Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. Special ships will unspool miles of 3-inch flexible pipeline like a garden hose across the seabed from England to the French coast. The first line, codenamed Bambi, will run from the Isle of Wight to Cherbourg once that port is captured. Later, the Dumbo line will run from Dungeness to Boulogne. In the months to come, these pipelines will carry hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel a day beneath the water, invisible to reconnaissance, untouchable by air attack. But even now, in the summer of 1944, fuel is coming ashore in quantities the Luftwaffe simply cannot account for, in quantities that no ordinary logistical understanding can explain, feeding the machine that is now growing on the French coast. And that fuel is now feeding something that has become, in these summer weeks, the defining feature of the Norman landscape. Luftwaffe pilots who dare to fly a mission over the roads behind the Allied lines return with the same report over and over, and it is not a report of movement. It is a report of a river, an endless 24-hour flow of American 2.5-ton trucks, the famous deuce and a half, moving bumper to bumper in disciplined columns that stretch to the horizon and beyond. A German fighter pilot will dive on such a column, cannons hammering, destroy 10 trucks. 20. It feels like victory. It is like throwing a stone into a river. The traffic pauses. Military police wave the flow around the burning wrecks. Recovery crews haul the ruined trucks into ditches, and minutes later the river resumes. By mid-July, in the headquarters of the 7th Army, the Chief of Staff, General Major Max Penzel, is staring at a map and at a stack of reports, and the two do not agree. The map shows a static front, miles of it. The front lines have barely moved in 7 weeks. The reports describe tactical victory after tactical victory. His men are killing Allied tanks, cutting supply roads, inflicting casualties that would break any other army on earth, and yet none of it is working. Something in his mind, and in the mind of Gunther Blumentritt at OB West, begins to slide into place. The replacement tanks, the self-repairing roads, the artificial harbor, the fuel that has no visible source, the rivers of trucks that cannot be dammed. These are not separate clever tricks. These are not disconnected marvels of enemy engineering. They are the organs of a single organism, and the Germans do not yet have a word for what that organism is. Fritz Bayerlein, in a letter that survives, will write of these weeks. We were being systematically smashed to pieces, and there was nothing we could do about it. My men were fighting, but it was a battle against an avalanche. The German command, sitting in its farmhouses and chateaux, believes it has done the essential thing. It has contained the beachhead. It has stopped the breakout. The front lines are static. The enemy has bled. They believe they are fighting a stalemate. They are not. They are watching something they cannot yet name finish charging. The last week of July, 1944, a strange quiet has settled over the Norman countryside. For 50 days, the German army has bled and the Allied army has bled, and the front lines on the Great Wall maps at OB West have barely twitched. Caen is a ruin. Saint-Lô is a ruin. The apple orchards are stumps. The famous hedgerows, those ancient walls of earth and root that the Norman farmers built 1,000 years ago, are shredded. The dead are still being pulled from the ditches. From the German perspective, this is a costly victory, but it is a victory. The invasion has not broken out. The beachhead is contained. The Allies are penned into a strip of country perhaps 30 miles deep, and every yard of it has cost them. In the language of the German General Staff, this is exactly the kind of grinding defensive battle that Germany does best. The enemy is exhausting himself on their positions. The panzers are hurt, but they are still in the line. The infantry is holding. The German commanders in these last days of July believe they are winning a war of attrition. They are, in fact, standing on a beach with their backs to the sea, watching a wave gather offshore, and they do not know what a wave is. The Panzer Lehr Division holds a section of the American front 6,000 yards wide west of Saint-Lô. This is Fritz Bayerlein's division. It is arguably the finest armored formation in the German army in the West, built from demonstration units, staffed with instructors, equipped with the best tanks Germany can build. Bayerlein himself is a general lieutenant, 45 years old, a Rommel protege from the desert, a man who understands armored warfare in his bones. His men are exhausted, but they are dug in. Their tanks and assault guns are hidden in the hedgerows, camouflaged with cut branches, buried in the earth so that only their turrets show. They have been fighting for 7 weeks. They have been bombed and shelled and strafed and probed, and they have held. On the morning of the 25th of July, they are expecting another American attack. They have been expecting it for days. Prisoners have talked. Radio intercepts have hinted. The Americans are massing infantry and armor to the north. Bayerlein has done what a professional commander does. He has thickened his line. He has registered his artillery. He has briefed his subordinates. Another head-on assault is coming, and Panzer is ready to break it, as it has broken every other attack that has come at it since June. They are ready to fight the war they have been fighting. They are not ready for what is about to happen. The first sign, just after 9:30 in the morning, is not an explosion. It is a sound, a low sound, a deepening sound, not the familiar shriek of fighter bombers, not the whistle of shells, something below all of that, a sound that seems to come from the ground itself. The soldiers in the hedgerows look up. The sky, from horizon to horizon, is turning black. It is not a formation of aircraft. It is a layer of aircraft, a sheet of them. More than 1,500 B-17 and B-24 heavy bombers in tight boxes, wingtip to wingtip, in the greatest concentration of air power ever assembled over a battlefield in the history of the world. Behind them come nearly 400 medium bombers. Behind those, more than 500 fighter bombers. Nearly 2,500 aircraft in total, all of them converging on a single tiny rectangle of the Earth's surface, 3.5 miles wide, 1.5 miles deep. Panzer is inside that rectangle. What happens over the next 2 hours is not a bombing. It is a geological event. In 120 minutes, the Allied air forces dropped more than 4,000 tons of high explosive onto a single rectangle of French farmland, smaller than many American county fairgrounds. More bombs dropped in a shorter time on a smaller piece of ground than in any tactical air operation ever attempted in the history of warfare. The ground, the ancient, patient Norman earth, stops being ground. It becomes an ocean. It heaves. It rolls in waves. Solid stone hedgerows that have stood for 1,000 years vanish in a single flash. Tanks weighing 60 tons, dug into revetments and covered with camouflage, are picked up by the shock waves and thrown, upside down, into craters the size of houses. Command bunkers buried 20 feet deep in the earth are crushed like eggs. Every telephone wire in the division is cut in the first 10 minutes. The entire nervous system of Panzer, the wires and the runners and the radio antennas by which a modern army breathes, is severed in a single blow. The men in the foxholes are not killed by shrapnel. Many of them are simply erased, vaporized by the pressure waves. Their uniforms are blown off their bodies. Their weapons are twisted into pieces of scrap. Bayerlein himself is at his forward command post, miles behind the front. He will later write that the shock waves knocked him to the floor 5 times. When the mountain lifts and he tries to reach his regiments by telephone, there is nothing. Silence on every line. He orders motorcycle messengers forward into the smoke. Most of them do not return. When he finally rides forward himself, he sees a landscape that he compares to the surface of the moon. Everything alive is dead. Everything standing is flattened. The few survivors are wandering in the craters. Some of them are naked, their uniforms blown to rags. Some of them cannot hear because their eardrums have burst. Some of them cannot speak. They stand in the smoke looking at nothing, and when officers approach them, they do not respond, because there is nothing left of the men who once wore those faces. Bayerlein will describe them in a letter that survives as The Walking Dead. He will estimate that 70% of his division has been destroyed or rendered combat ineffective in a single morning. All of his frontline companies, he writes, are wiped out. The elite Panzer division, the pride of the German army in the West, has ceased to exist as a fighting force before lunch. And then the second phase of the industrial process begins. An eerie silence falls over the Norman countryside, broken only by the crackle of 1,000 fires. A great churning cloud of brown dust rises thousands of feet into the summer sky, blotting out the sun. For nearly an hour, an artificial night lies over the battlefield. Out of that darkness, the American First Army comes. It does not come as an attack. It comes as a release of pressure. Through the 4-mile-wide gap that has been blasted in the German lines, they flow. And what the few surviving Germans see, peering out from the wreckage, is not what any of them expected. The first vehicles are not tanks. They are bulldozers, armored bulldozers methodically filling in the very craters that the American bombers have just created, clearing a road, preparing the way. And behind the bulldozers comes the river of steel. Sherman tanks, 4 and 5 abreast, not in tactical formations, not deployed for battle, but simply driving forward like traffic on a highway, not hunting, not maneuvering, just moving through a space that has been cleared for them. Behind the tanks, infantry in half-tracks. Behind the infantry, trucks, and more trucks, and more trucks, thousands of them. A moving city, carrying the fuel, the ammunition, the food, the spare parts, the mail from home, the entire circulatory system of the machine, now unleashed from its coastal cage and pouring forward into the open country of France. The last remaining German anti-tank guns fire from the flanks. An 88-millimeter gun crew, hidden in a wrecked farmhouse, brews up a Sherman, then another, then a third. It is heroic, it is professionally executed, and it is completely meaningless. The column does not stop. It does not slow. It flows around the burning wrecks like water around a stone. The gun is silenced within minutes by the tanks that come next. Somewhere in that river of steel is a young lieutenant colonel named Creighton Abrams, commanding a battalion of Shermans in the 4th Armored Division. He will later become the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, and the M1 Abrams tank will be named for him. But on this day, in July 1944, he is simply one of thousands of American officers riding forward on a wave that no one can stop. The commander of this offensive, General Omar Bradley, has codenamed it Operation Cobra. He named it well. The strike is fast. It is direct. It is aimed at the head, and it kills the head in one blow. In less than 5 hours, the entire German front in Normandy collapses. Not slowly, not in stages, all at once. The idea of a front line simply ceases to exist. General Pemsel at 7th Army Headquarters is receiving reports from division commanders whose divisions have vanished. They speak of an enemy who is not to their front, but behind them, beside them, in their rear, in their headquarters areas. The American armored columns are not fighting a battle of breakthrough. They are performing a continental-scale maneuver, bypassing what remains of German resistance, driving deep into the German rear, cutting communications, overrunning supply dumps, capturing generals in their pajamas. The German defensive system that held for 50 days of the most brutal attritional warfare in the Western War is annihilated in less than 5 hours. Within a week, American tanks are in Avranches, at the base of the Cotentin Peninsula. Within 2 weeks, they are pouring into Brittany and swinging east toward the Seine. Within a month, Paris will fall. By September, the leading elements of the American Army will be on the German border. The factory has rolled off its foundation, and it is consuming France. And so we return at the end to a man on a seawall, to the sentence he spoke in the cold spring wind at Rivabella. Rommel was right. The first 24 hours of the invasion were decisive, but they were decisive for a reason that neither Rommel, nor von Rundstedt, nor Hitler, nor any member of the German High Command was capable of imagining. The Allies did not need to win the war on the beaches. They only needed to survive them. They did not need to conquer France in a day. They only needed to survive long enough to find a place to plug in their machine. The real victory of the 6th of June was not the capture of a village. It was not the seizure of a road junction. It was the establishment of a connection. The beachhead was not the objective. The beachhead was the socket. The power source was 3,000 miles away, in the shipyards of the Clyde and the foundries of Pittsburgh and the assembly halls of Detroit. The invasion was, in the simplest and most brutal sense, the act of running an extension cord across the English Channel. For 7 weeks, the German army fought a battle that in any previous war it would have been winning. It held its ground. It bled the attacker. It killed the enemy's tanks. It cratered the enemy's roads. In the terms of every doctrine the German general staff had ever written, this was a defensive victory. But they were measuring the wrong things. They were counting the bodies. They failed to count the cargo manifests. They tracked the destroyed tanks. They failed to track the replacement rate. They saw the battle for Normandy as a closed system, in which every Allied loss was a German gain. They could not comprehend an opponent for whom losses were not subtractions at all, but simply variables in a larger industrial equation. The German army was arguably the most professionally skilled military instrument in the world at the art of fighting a conventional war. Its generals were masters of maneuver. Its soldiers were disciplined and battle-hardened. Its non-commissioned officers were legendary for their initiative. It had a brilliant textbook plan for defeating a 1940s amphibious assault. It knew how to isolate an enemy army, cut its supply lines, and destroy it in a classic battle of encirclement. It was prepared to fight soldiers. It was prepared to fight tanks. It was prepared to fight ships and planes. It was not prepared to fight a factory. How do you encircle an army whose supply line is buried on the ocean floor? How do you wage a battle of attrition against an opponent who can replace a tank faster than you can write the after-action report? How do you lay siege to a force that brings its own harbor with it, sunk in concrete quays and floating pierheads 2 kilometers off a beach that was contested only weeks before? The German High Command spent months, years, consumed by the question of where. It was the great agonizing geographic riddle. Where would the Allies land? Which port would they aim for? Which beach? Which stretch of coast? This question paralyzed their command structure. It pitted their finest generals against each other. It led Hitler to lock away his best Panzer divisions until, on the day it mattered most, he was asleep. But their obsessive focus on the map of France blinded them to the far more important question, the one they never truly thought to ask. They asked where. They failed to ask what. They saw an army. What crossed the Channel was an economic system. They prepared for a military assault. What they faced was an industrial process, weaponized and set on wheels. Every element that baffled them, the endless stream of replacements, the roads that repaired themselves, the artificial port that bloomed from the sea, the invisible fuel that flowed beneath the waves, the rivers of trucks that could not be dammed. All of these were not separate marvels. They were the integrated, interdependent organs of a single organism. An industrial creature whose front claws were dug into the soil of France and whose body stretched all the way back across the ocean to a country that had never been bombed, whose factories ran 24 hours a day, whose workers, many of them women, were building tanks and trucks and airplanes faster than the entire Axis world could destroy them. The Atlantic Wall did not fail because its concrete was thin. It did not fail because the men behind the guns were cowards, because they were not. It did not fail because Rommel was foolish, because he was not, or because von Rundstedt was foolish, because he was not either. It failed because it was built to defeat an invasion, and what came ashore was not an invasion. It was the front end of an assembly line. Rommel had promised his Führer that the first day would be the longest day. He was more right than he knew. But it was not one day, it was 50. And on the 51st day, the wall, the beach, the divisions, the whole intricate architecture of Fortress Europe was rolled up like a carpet in a single morning by an enemy the German High Command had never, in all their careful planning, truly understood. They had meticulously planned to fight an invasion. They had never understood that the invasion was only the first step. The real objective was to deploy an assembly line on the coast of France. And by the last week of July, in the shattered orchards of Normandy, that assembly line was open for business.